Hey CW Apes, Mr. Kennedy here, and this is your Chapter 10 lecture on environmental health and toxicology. Today, we're going to spend quite a bit of time digging into this idea of environmental health. We're going to look at disease, infectious and emerging diseases, antibiotics, pesticide resistance, all manner of toxic chemicals, and work our way even through some health policy at the end. There's so much information here that I'll be honest with you, I'll probably have to break this up into at least two parts. Otherwise, you're not only going to need a snack bar break, but even a potty break somewhere in the middle of this. This thing could go on for hours. So without any further ado, let's get moving and grooving. We're going to start with just some basic definitions here. Like, what does it mean to be healthy? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. You could think of it like points on a pyramid, right? So you got your physical health, your mental health, and your social well-being making up those points that in the middle make you healthy. Any deviation from complete well-being in those areas is what we call a disease, okay? Uh, by definition, a disease is an abnormal change in the body's condition that impairs physical or psychological function. There's all kinds of stuff that can lead to these deviations, and some of those things are, well, short-term. Maybe they only affect us for a few days. Other things are chronic, and they'll affect us like for years. Diet, nutrition, infectious agents, toxic chemicals, genetics, trauma, psychological stress, they all play roles. If these things just make you sick without killing you, we refer to that as the morbidity of diet and nutrition, infectious agents, toxic chemicals, genetics, trauma, and psychological stress. If it actually kills you, then there's a mortality of diet, nutrition, infectious agents, toxic chemicals, genetics, trauma, and psychological stress, right? Let's move on. When we think about environmental health and these deviations from complete wellness in physical, mental, and social areas, what pushes us away from those things, aside from the list I just read you? Well, we could just use a blanket term and use the word risk. Risk pushes us away from physical well-being. Risk can push us away from social well-being. Risk can push us away from any type of health and really we can expose ourselves to risk in just doing day-to-day activities. Risk is just the possibility of suffering harm, and that harm could come from any manner of hazard, and that hazard can cause an injury, disease, economic loss, environmental damage. Like, it could come from anywhere. Now, I don't want to scare you, but the reality of it is there's a lot of risk in the world today, but as humans, as a species, and even as individuals, we're doing an okay job managing it. Like, we're all right. We're doing good. And how do I know that? Well, look at this slide, global disease burden. The life expectancy of people on this planet has continued to go up generation after generation after generation after generation. There was a time in human history your life expectancy was like, I don't know, maybe 40 years. And now, like, in the United States, the average age or average life expectancy is pushing 80. Infant mortality is also decreasing, which means more and more babies are surviving and reaching adulthood. Now, some people might be frightened by that because they think, my goodness, like, where are we going to put all these people? Our population is just going to explode. That's not the message here today. The message here today is we're managing risk and we're doing a good job so far, okay? Now, when you think about risk, I also want you to think about chronic conditions that could maybe create premature death and disease in both developed and developing countries. Look at this. By the year 2020, it's speculated that heart disease might actually become the leading source of disability and disease worldwide. You may not see it as a problem here where you live, but worldwide, we're seeing more and more people suffering with heart-related illness. And cancer rates, well, they could continue to rise. It's thought that by the year 2020, cancer rates could, well, increase by as much as 50%. Now, these are just, mathematical predictions, definitely not guarantees, but, if the probability is there, that's something that we should pay attention to. Diabetes is also on the increase. 1/3 of children born in North America today will develop diabetes in their lifetime due to poor diet and exercise. WHO, the World Health Organization, projects that like psychological conditions could increase their share of global disease burden from 10% currently to 15%, with depression being the second largest cause of, well, all years lived with disability. Even tobacco related lung diseases are increasing on a massive scale worldwide. Let's get in and look at infectious disease. Infectious disease, as opposed to something caused by a toxic chemical for that matter, is a disease that can be spread from one individual to the next, right? Like, think about bacteria and viruses and those sorts of things. Infectious disease is often considered communicable when it moves from one individual to the next. Communicable diseases are still responsible for about 1/3 of all disease related deaths. And you might go, well, what about the other 2/3? Well, there is a such thing called non communicable diseases, right? And those are the ones that can't be spread from person to person. You inherit them like a genetic disorder. Majority of countries with poor nutrition, sanitation, and vaccination are the countries where we see the highest incidences of communicable diseases. New diseases test our defenses in developed countries every year. Doesn't matter if we're talking about the common cold or the flu or something else. Better nutrition, clean water, improved sanitation, and inoculation of children could actually eliminate most of the deaths from communicable diseases, but realistically, these communicable diseases will never, ever, ever be completely eradicated because most of them have reservoirs in the animal kingdom that we simply can't change or get rid of. Pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing organisms. Anything like a virus, bacteria, a protist, or parasite of all manner of speaking could be considered pathogenic. There are all kinds of organisms that would really love to, well, colonize you, right? Viruses have to have a host in order to reproduce. There are viruses that love people. There are viruses that love plants. There are viruses that love cats, dogs, fish, and frogs. There are viruses out there. There are more than 200 known viruses that can actually make a human sick. So if you think mathematically speaking, if you got really good and sick, like, I don't know, 10 times a year, just to work through the viruses that are out there that can make us sick, like you could be sick for like 20 years. Thank goodness you got a great immune system to protect you from those things. Bacteria, protists, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. The greatest loss of life in a single year from a pathogen on record was the influenza pandemic of 1918. It actually killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Statistics say that, like, people were almost literally like dying where they stood within hours. Malaria is another big one. Malaria is one that I don't know if we've just kind of gotten lazy about it or if people have just gotten used to it. But malaria still kills upwards of 600,000 people every year. In bad years, that number could jump to 2 million. And it's the same thing year after year after year. Why don't we do something about it? Why don't we get rid of malaria? Well, we've tried. But there's this lovely little mosquito called the Anopheles mosquito that carries the malaria parasite and likes to feed on people, and we just can't kill all the mosquitoes, right? So we've got malaria, and it's going to be with us for the foreseeable future. That brings us to emerging diseases. Emerging diseases, well, these are diseases that are not previously known. I've got a list here like bird flu, Ebola, HIV. These are things that are relatively young, probably something that, well, by the time you see this video that you'll be familiar with is COVID-19. It's an emerging disease, one that has been absent or unknown for at least 20 years. This is a brand new thing. Air travel makes it possible to spread emerging diseases around the globe super, super quick. So no matter where a disease starts, it can make it around the globe in as little as 2 weeks, right? That's pretty crazy. When you think about recent human disease outbreaks, there's a whole mess of them here on this map of the world for you to check out. There have been a variety of things that have popped up pretty much everywhere across the globe. No single country is immune to the idea of emerging disease. Conservation medicine. So when you think about like all this disease, maybe at some point, like, it can be kind of frightening. But at the end of the day, like our medical community, they are absolutely amazing. And we are constantly developing new ways to treat new diseases and to protect people. A lot of that comes from our understanding of nature. There are diseases that actually occur in nature that help us learn how to fight diseases in people. There are ecological disasters like animal epidemics. One thing that showed up on an AP test not long ago was the white nose syndrome in bats, where a fungus that was introduced to the eastern United States like eradicated bat populations, and the poor creatures had no resistance to it whatsoever. California sea lions, believe it or not, they can carry herpes one virus, and spread that, in their populations. They pick it up from human sewage. So if there's sewage going out to sea waterways and these poor little guys are swimming through it, they can pick that up. There was an imported fungus that's killing oak, redwood, Doug firs in trees in California, and a dermo parasite in oysters that's spreading rapidly through the East Coast as a result of climate change. So, like, humans aren't the only ones that are exposed to disease, right? Conservation medicine examines how environmental changes threaten the health of humans and our natural communities. And it's a growing area of science, and it's something that is hugely important for our future. All right, ladies and gents, Mr. Kennedy's going to pause here for station identification. We'll pick this up with part two. I'll see you next time.